Hello and welcome to Season 2, Episode 1 of Natter with Niamh. I'm so happy to have you here. And it's September, the 2nd of September. The only thing that makes me really happy about that is that it's almost soup season. I mean, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love summer and I love the ease of salads, but there's just something about soup that is, I don't know, they're grounding, they're warming, they're comforting. And I love experimenting and making different soups. But that is the only thing I really like about winter, because I absolutely hate being cold. And once the temperature drops below about 20 degrees, I'm just cold. But hey, I'm celebrating that it's almost soup season. The other thing I'm also kind of looking forward to is Christmas. And what I wanted to ask you, my wonderful listeners, is do you have any traditions around this time of the year? So maybe you have traditions around Halloween and All Souls Day or all the Day of the Dead, whatever you call it in your particular region, or whether you have traditions around Christmas or anything like that. I would love to do some podcasts just looking at our traditions and the stories around our traditions. So if you've been on the podcast as a guest before, you are, of course, more than welcome to come again and talk to me about traditions, to tell your stories around traditions, whether it's just a family tradition or a long-held tradition through your culture, your society, whatever. I would just love to hear about your traditions, because I think this time of the year is a year where we have lots of festivals and lots of traditions, but it's also a time of year when we can feel less connected and less connected and more lonely, because we're spending more time indoors because the weather is bleaker. Well, for those of us on this side of the world, the weather is bleaker and we're less likely to go out. And even though we do have the wonderful comforts of soup and stews and all the other glorious foods that come with autumn and winter, it can be a really hard time for some people because it is harder to get out when the weather's cold, or if you have some sort of disability that makes you scared of walking on wet leaves or on icy footpaths. It can feel like you're just trapped indoors. And so the whole purpose I had in setting up this podcast was to connect people. And so one of the ways we connect, not just through stories, but through our traditions, the traditions we hold and the traditions that we pass down through families, and the traditions that we take on because we've seen somebody else do them and we've loved it and thought that was a really good idea, so we've decided to create a tradition for ourselves. So I want to connect us, not just through our stories, but also through our traditions. Through some of the stories I've shared or have been shared on this podcast already, we can see that there's a thread running through nearly every culture, nearly every society. We're all human. We all love the same things. We hate the same things. We all react in similar ways to different stimuli. And yet we're all so very, very different. There are things that will affect me on a much deeper level, for instance, than they will affect you, and vice versa. But it's only through listening to the stories of others, hearing what other people have gone through, hearing what they're doing in their lives, that we can actually even really imagine what might be possible for us. That sometimes we can connect the dots and think, oh, hey, they did that. Maybe, just maybe, that's possible for me too. Sometimes just in hearing somebody else's story. allows us to feel connected, less alone in our grief, in our despair, even sometimes in our joy. We need to share all of our emotions, but we tend to keep the ones we have labeled negative or bad private. And that not only does us a huge injustice, it can isolate us, because we actually think that nobody else feels like that. We can sometimes think that not only are you alone, but that you shouldn't be feeling the feelings you're feeling. All of our feelings, our emotions are here for a reason. And it's time we got them out into the open. It's time that we acknowledged that we are emotional beings as well as human beings, that our emotions are here as messengers. Sometimes they're here to tell us that there's something that needs fixing. Sometimes they're just here because they're here, because we've experienced something. And with every experience comes emotions. And those emotions can be joyful, excitement, they can be anxiety, they can be grief. But part of being human is learning to experience our emotions in the moment and to allow them to pass through us. To know that in any given moment, the emotions we are feeling are temporary. It's only when we don't allow ourselves to feel our emotions, and when we repress them because we think we shouldn't be feeling like this, because society has shamed us for feeling like this, that we create anxiety and despair for ourselves. Or at least that's my experience. I realized a lot of the anxiety and depression I suffered from many years was due to the repression of emotions, not allowing myself to even name the emotions, let alone feel them and process them. And as well as connecting people. Part of my aim of this podcast is for you to see that everything about you in this moment of time is absolutely perfect. All we have is now. We can't go back to yesterday and change or fix anything if you wanted to. You can't. You can't go to the future because it hasn't arrived yet and we don't know what it holds. All we have is now. And to realize that in this moment, everything is as it should be and you are perfect as you are in this moment, no matter what is going on for you. That's just beautiful. So whether you're feeling joy at the moment, or grief, or anxiety, or despair, accept that in this moment. When we deeply accept and acknowledge our emotions, we allow them to flow through us. And in the next moment, we will feel differently. This is the work I do with so many women who for years have repressed emotions. And we work on allowing them to feel their emotions, to name them to start with, then to just feel them, and then to just let them flow through. So they know they can move through their day and they're feeling different things, but those feelings won't last unless we decide we're going to hold on to them. And sometimes I say decide, sometimes that decision is an unconscious decision. It's because of how we've been conditioned and brought up. We don't show our emotions. We wear a mask. We put on a front. And so when something upsets us or we're angry, we don't speak about it in that moment. How many times have you been served a meal in a restaurant or a coffee in a coffee shop and it's been cold and you've kind of just put up and shut up? instead of speaking up. That's repressing your emotions. You probably feel horrible in that moment. You might feel guilt about asking for your meal or your coffee to be replaced, because again, social conditioning, because you're not supposed to speak up. But why should you put up with something that isn't right? Why should you repress your feelings around that just to keep somebody else happy? Because your happiness, and your joy and your peace is just as important as everybody else's. And I firmly believe that it is only when women come into our own, when we acknowledge ourselves, when we begin to feel and process our emotions and speak up for ourselves, when women come into their own and they own themselves wholly and fully, that the world will change. And that doesn't mean that men don't have a part to play in this either. They do, of course they do. Men need to see women for who they are, truly who they are, for all that they can bring to the world. They need to stop objectifying and sexualizing women and see them as beautiful, capable, strong, nurturing human beings who have so much to bring to this world. And we women, on the other hand, need to stop negating men. We need to also stop putting them on pedestals. We need to be teaching our sons to bring out their nurturing side, to be listening to their intuition, to learning to express and feel their emotions too, because it's not just women, it's society as a whole. We need to be teaching our young men that it is actually okay to cry, that it is okay to show those so-called weaker or feminine emotions, that all emotions have place and value. And not just all emotions, but every single human being on this planet has a place and a value here. And it's only when we begin to recognize that will this planet begin to change? Will this planet begin to re-emerge? Will we solve the problems that we're currently facing? Because when we work together, we can come up with much better solutions, rather than at the moment fighting for supremacy, because none of us is better than the other. We all have different things to bring to the world. We all have our own unique way of doing things, of saying things, of explaining things, our own ideas of how things should work. And when we learn to throw those all into one melting pot, who knows what might come out of it? And talking of pots, we've come a long way from soup, haven't we? Which is where this podcast began. I hope you enjoyed listening to my ramblings, to my mission, and that you will continue to listen. And please do share this podcast if you enjoyed it and you think others would enjoy it. And if you want to come on and share your story, your traditions, please do let me know. I would love to hear from you. Thank you, and I will see you on the next episode.